I set a marathon as a distance that I wanted to do, and I needed to get it out of my system. And COVID was causing things to open and close all the time. Japan was a country that we kind of sealed our borders, so we didn't have anybody coming in and coming out. But within the country, even though we didn't have lockdowns, we did have a lot of situations where all the events were cancelled. Because things are opening and closing all the time, I thought I just need to. I don't care how big the event is. It could be like 5 people. If there's a marathon event out there that is organized, I just want to enter it. So I found this local event that was in Yokohama. It was just on a length of path near a river. I put in my entry. I think I had about 4 weeks to prepare. I just entered it, rocked up on the day, and just take a picture first off. It started raining, so there were some people that looked really serious, in their short shorts and vests ready to go. There's me wearing a raincoat thinking maybe I shouldn't have worn this raincoat. They just set us off. It was great fun.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast, where we tell the extraordinary stories of everyday runners, like this week's guest, Anthony Swain. Anthony only started running during the COVID pandemic after he was diagnosed with a back injury. At that point, he was resting from his usual sport of martial arts and karate, but he suddenly found that running was a new passion, even though he'd been asthmatic as a child. Before long, Anthony was running long distances and taking on his first marathon, a 27-person event which he had to run in a mask. But by now, he was gripped, and an ultramarathon soon followed. I spoke to Anthony about the joys of running, avoiding boars and bears, or the fear of them at least, on the trails, and about why the coronavirus pandemic started his love of the sport.
Yeah, Corona was something that affected all of us in different ways. So, personally, I've never been a runner at all. I've been doing martial arts for a long time, but when I was young, I had sort of exercise-induced asthma. So if I ran or had any sort of steady state cardio it didn't need to be long. My lungs would just sort of close up. So that was not something that I could really cope with. But I could do martial arts for no problem for some reason. But when I ran, it just caused my lungs to mess up. But with the pandemic, my dojo all closed down, so I wasn't able to go out and do the training that I usually did. So I started training at home a lot. I did a lot of stretching, a lot of sort of calisthenic style stuff, press ups, handstands, learning how to do those kind of things. But I was working at home as well, and working at home, I was sitting on a chair all the time, even though I have a decent chair. I ended up where I had some sort of spasm in the muscles of my lower back, and that pressed on my sciatic nerve, which was causing me a lot of pain just to sit down. I went to a sort of physiotherapist that said, "Oh, maybe you could try something that moving around a little bit more, stretching." I thought I'm already stretching, so I started running, and that seemed to clear it up. And once I started running, I realized, oh, my lungs aren't tightening up anymore. Started running, kind of enjoyed it. And then I suddenly started dropping lots and lots of weight. And I thought, well, I'm going to keep this going. I ended up just running and running and running. I think I ended up in about 3 months, losing about 10 kilograms, and just really enjoyed the experience of it and got hooked from there.
Yeah, so you kind of loved running from the start of doing it, and it was almost an entirely new thing for you because of
Mm.
this issue you'd had previously.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Especially because it was something that it went from being something that I was almost scared of and not being able to do because of my asthma to, getting over my asthma and then just being able to, rediscover it and enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's great. And it's because we ought to let listeners know that you're actually in Japan. Because
Yes.
obviously you the martial arts might give it away a little bit, but the accent probably suggests elsewhere.
Yeah.
Is Japan quite a big country for running? What's the running scene like out there?
Oh, the running scene in Japan is great. I believe it's actually a country that produces some of the top runners in the world. It's potentially the third fastest running country behind Kenya and Ethiopia. There's a huge running scene based around things like ekidens, which are long distance marathons. Oh, sorry, long distance relays, should I say? They're
Right.
very popular around the end of the year. There's a brilliant book by an author called Darren Finn, who wrote The Way of the Runner, where he spent about a year, potentially a bit longer, learning about the Ekiden scene in Japan. He also wrote Running with the Kenyans as well, where he spent some time in Iten in Kenya, where he learned from Kenyan runners, and then he came to Japan and learned from Japanese runners. It's a very good book.
Yeah, I've read. He did a book recently, which I'm going to forget the name of, but I'm sure people will be shouting at me now about ultra running and
Oh,
so on,
yeah,
which is
that was the
really good as
first one I
well.
read. Yeah,
Yeah,
The Rise of the Ultra Runners. That's a fantastic book. I read that one as well.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, I need to catch up with the other ones as
Hmm.
too. So as you were going out, I'm guessing it was in the pandemic. Did that make it a very individual sport for you to start with?
Oh, very much so. For the first maybe year, actually, it wasn't a year that I tell a lie. But most of the time that I was running completely by myself. I didn't run socially at all. Within the first year and a bit, I think I entered two events and I didn't run with anybody else. I just was getting up in the morning and running, or running in the evening as well. I do a lot of double runs where I'd be running once in the morning and once in the evening just to try and get my distance up.
Yeah, I was just going to say actually as well that I don't know what it was like. I think things were a little bit less restrictive in Japan than they were perhaps here in the UK because we had this strange thing where a lot of people were allowed out for our I think our one bit of exercise every day, and lots of people would go running, but you'd sort of almost run away from anybody else that you saw when they were coming down the road. I'm not sure if that was the same experience for you.
Well, Japan never really had any restrictions in terms of you're not allowed to go out. It was very much a sort of request from the government to don't go places as much as possible. And when we were going out, we were wearing masks. So I say that I didn't enter really any events other than two major events, but I ran both of those events. I ran one marathon and one ultra marathon where I needed to wear a mask for the entire duration. So I had to get used to wearing a mask while running as well. Wearing a mask is something that I do during the winter anyway, because I do get some asthmatic symptoms if I don't sort of have any sort of warm air filter. So it is something that I did get used to, but it happens.
Yeah, I saw that actually, and I wanted to talk to you about that marathon that you eventually did because it sounds fascinating, not least for the sort of numbers involved, but also for the wearing a mask, which I just couldn't imagine doing that, particularly as you've already mentioned that you'd historically had sort of breathing issues,
Hmm.
but it was okay for you.
Yeah. For some reason, the masks don't really bother me when I run. So, in Japan, actually, people make fun of the people in Japan that say, "Oh, Japan's a four-season country." There are many countries that have four seasons. Of course, being from the UK, you know that you have spring, summer, autumn, and winter, and it rains during all of them.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
in Japan, it's spring's a very beautiful season where the flowers are coming out. Summer is just heat and death. You can go like crack eggs on the pavement and it will cook them. Or autumn is another beautiful season where it's relatively livable, but winter gets really cold. I'd be going out during the winter and my mask would freeze solid sometimes. It was really chilly during that times, but because it was so cold, wearing the mask was actually quite useful for keeping a sort of pocket of hot air just in front of my mouth.
Right.
So I wasn't breathing any sort of frigid air where there'd be a huge difference in temperature between the outside and the inside, but it would keep me alive and kicking and still able to keep moving forward. Um, but wearing the mask during the marathon and stuff as well, and the ultra that I did, I bought a sports mask and I was kind of able to breathe from under the mask a little bit more efficiently, but I still could breathe without any real issues. Some people really sort of don't like to wear masks for some reason, especially outside of Japan. It's very normal for people to wear masks in
Yeah.
Japan, and I have a science background as well. I worked in a lab for many years, whereas I was having to wear a mask, and it's just something that I just got on with. People in Japan tend to get on with that rather than worry about it.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I don't know this 100% sure, but I'm fairly confident that actually some of the masks we had here in the UK for an awful lot of the pandemic were actually not very good. They weren't. I mean, I don't want to get into how good they were at actually stopping COVID, because I suspect they weren't always that
Hmm.
good at that either. But they weren't particularly fantastic masks, and we were sort of seeing sometimes pictures from all around the world, including places like Japan, where you had a much higher standard of masks that allowed you to do more things, really.
Well, I was wearing a cloth mask a lot of the time. I don't want to get into too much into the mask kind of situation, but one of the big problems with masks is that if you wear them and they get saturated with water from the breathing, and then you touch them, and then you touch something else, that's how transmission can happen. So, I think people's use of the masks were not particularly fantastic sometimes, but most people are not trained to use masks, and that's not really anybody's fault. I mean, everybody did their best. Some people were very against them. Some people were just, oh, these don't work. I don't want to use them. It's like, "Oh, yeah, okay."
Yeah,
Thankfully,
we'll
it's mostly
maybe
over.
yeah, maybe move away from masks into something else that you weren't immediately trained into, which was running. But was it something that you picked up quite quickly and immediately enjoyed? Because I guess you'd been told to do it because you'd had this back issue. You could have
Mm.
gone out, done 5 runs, thought my back's a bit better, and gone, well, that's it. That's running done. I'll go back to doing martial arts and stretching, and I'm quite happy. But obviously, you must have really enjoyed it.
Well, I did enjoy it, but it was in sort of a masochistic way as well. Because when I started running, it was I could feel myself going a little bit further, but I started getting some pain in my right knee as well as I was doing it. I was sort of obsessed with the fact that I was getting fitter as well, and my weight was going down. And it's like,
Mm.
oh, my right knee's kind of hurting, but I don't really want to stop. So I needed to do a sort of a lot of running and walking for a while, where I'd run a certain amount of distance, and then my knee would start hurting, then I'd walk for a while, then as soon as that cleared up, I'd run again. So I did a lot of 10Ks where about half of it was running and half of it was walking, just split up with like maybe split up into 100-meter um chunks up to some point. It did actually get a little bit weird because I was getting to the point where I could run 5K, and then my knee would start hurting after 5K, and then I'd run walk for the rest of it. But that eventually got um, the distance where my knee started hurting kind of changed. It kind of extended further and further until it just kind of stopped hurting, and it almost became a game. It's like, when's my knee going to start hurting today? At what distance? It's like, oh, 7K today. I must be getting stronger.
So you almost ran the injury out. I'm not sure it's the
Yeah,
greatest advice, but it obviously
no,
worked
no.
for you.
I don't tell anybody to copy what I've done at all. Yeah, please do not run injuries until they go away.
And at what point did you kind of think, well, I want to start doing races now, and then move into this attempt at this marathon, which sounds like it sounds like a really fantastic event to do, because I think for a start there were 27 people took part in it, which
Hmm.
is, small is beautiful sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I started running, and back in the day when I was young and naive, I thought, oh, marathons are like the ultimate distance to run. Many people say, oh, life isn't it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I thought, oh, this is a really special distance. And I was, listening to audiobooks as I was going along, and I was listening to some David Goggins audio books and interviews and whatnot. And his book on Can't Hurt Me is fantastic fuel. But I have to wonder how many people have been injured listening to David Goggins, because he's a very inspirational character. But he was talking about running ultra marathons and whatnot. I thought, yeah, I need to, if this guy can run ultra marathons, I can at least do a marathon. So I set a marathon as a distance that I wanted to do, and I needed to get it out of my system. And COVID was causing things to open and close all the time. Japan was a country that we kind of sealed our borders, so we didn't have anybody coming in and coming out. But within the country, even though we didn't have lockdowns, we did have a lot of situations where all the events were cancelled. So I wanted to get a marathon out of my system. Because things are opening and closing all the time, I thought, I just need to, I don't care how big the event is. It could be like 5 people. If there's a marathon event out there that is organized, I just want to enter it and run it and get out of my system. So I found this local event that was in Yokohama. I live in Kanagawa, and I live about 15-20 minutes away from Yokohama, which is a very large city. I'm sure people have heard of Yokohama.
Yeah.
It's next to Tokyo, pretty much one of the largest cities in Kanagawa. It was just on a kind of length of path near a river. I thought, yeah, I'll give it a go. So I put it in. I put in my entry. I think I had about 4 weeks to prepare, potentially even less at that time. I just entered it, rocked up on the day, and just like, yeah, line up over there. Take a picture first off. It started raining, so there were some people that looked really serious, in their short shorts and vests ready to go. There's me wearing a raincoat thinking maybe I shouldn't have worn this raincoat, and they just set us off, and it was great fun. It was very daunting as well. There weren't many people. As soon as everybody set off, I was just didn't see anybody else for the rest of the race almost until I crossed the finish line. But it was a fantastic event. As you mentioned, 27 people. I think I came in about 10th, and yeah, I'd definitely do that again.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I mean, there's not too many people who can say they've sort of finished 10th in a marathon unless they're elite athletes. So
When there's only 27 people, it's, oh yeah, finished 10th. That's the top, what, 50%?
we don't need to tell people everything. just go and finish 10th. That's fine, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
And when you got to the end of that race, was Goggins's voice? Was there other voices in your head saying, I need to go further now. I've done this marathon. What next?
Yeah, but it was very much like that. That was the marathon was just a stepping stone. When you say the Goggins voice interfere with me during that marathon, I actually set up a playlist on my phone as well, where when I was getting close to the end, going the distance would go on repeat until I hit the end. So it's like the Goggins theme, just so I could finish the race whilst going the distance.
Yeah.
But because the marathon wasn't my ultimate goal, that was just the first kind of stepping stone. I did want to enter an ultra marathon. I did the exact same strategy. I just wanted to find a sort of local ultra marathon if I could, because the events were opening and closing all the time. In fact, about just a few days after my first marathon, all the events closed down again. And so it's a good thing that I did it at that time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do it. For the next ultra marathon, I entered this small local event organizer called Michikusa Ultra. They organize these really small events that have a focus on people being able to finish them. They're not competitive. They don't give out first, second, third places or prizes for them. They do actually give out first, second, and third places for some of the events, but there were no prizes for it. The event that I entered, I didn't even get a medal for doing it. I was a bit gutted at that, actually, that I didn't get a medal. But there wasn't any real branding or anything. It was the first time that they ran a course. It was at midnight. We started at 9 p.m. in Yokosuka, which is a kind of navy town in Kanagawa, and we ran around the Miura Peninsula in the middle of the night. There were about 200 people set to attend, and about 100 had to drop out due to COVID.
Right. Wow.
Really small number of people, really sparse, almost no volunteers as well. So it was just like running around in the dark in a place that I didn't know anything about, hoping that I don't get mauled by a bear or anything.
How did you find running in the dark? Was it kind of the first time you'd done that?
Well, I ran at night a lot anyway, because I run in the morning and the evening. It gets darker a lot quicker in Japan than it does in the UK. I was kind of surprised when I first came to Japan in summer, because it was getting dark at like 7, 8 p.m. Like, why is it dark? In the UK, it stays light for so long during the summer, and then in Japan, it gets dark so quickly. So I was running at the night anyway, wearing a headlamp and getting used to that, but never in the dead of night. Running at like, 9, 10 p.m. is one thing, but running at like 2, 3 a.m. is a
Yeah.
completely different kettle of fish because there's nobody around. And your circadian rhythm start messing with you. It's maybe I shouldn't be out at this time. And then you start thinking, there's nobody else around. What if something happens to me? What if I do get attacked by, there are probably no bears out there, but I know that they have wild boars around here as well. It's like, I hope I don't get attacked by a boar or something. I need to stay with these people that I am around with because I did have a small group of people that I was running with that I just met on the day. And I ran with them, and I ended up becoming really good friends with this group of people that I was running with. So I'm very happy that I could stick to some people because I'd have never found my way out of the dark if it wasn't for them.
And when we say ultra, what distance what were you talking about for that race?
Oh, that one was 70 kilometers.
Right.
So it was actually the first time that I'd broken marathon distance and only the second time that I'd broken 30K distance at that time. It was a big jump.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's quite a big jump. You didn't sort of go from the marathon to 50K or anything else like that. You thought, right, we're going all the way up to 70. And as you were going around, were you in the dark trying to avoid the wild boars? Were you always pretty confident of finishing?
Failure wasn't really an option. It was just kind of, I just need to keep going. I'll walk it if I have to. I'll find a way to get it done. I don't think I've DNF'd a race so far. Fingers crossed. Touch wood, should I say?
Yeah.
I've actually just entered last week. I actually entered my another ultra for next year. I've entered a 118-kilometer ultra around the Fuji Five Lakes area. I put in my entry last week and it's been accepted, so I'm looking forward to that in April. That was going to be fantastic. But 70 is still my maximum that I've ever run, and I probably won't break that before then. So it's going to be another step up to my next level.
And did you feel after you completed that event, I mean, obviously you've done sport before with the martial arts and so on, but did doing that kind of extreme distance, did that kind of add anything to your life? Did it translate into everyday life in any way?
Yeah, definitely. It just means that there's something that I described that some people I don't think they really understand it unless they've experienced this in different. But there are different flavors of pain, as it were. And if you are running really long distances, it sort of hits you in a sort of systemic way. Your legs start hurting, but then you get, fatigue through your entire body, and it just hits you in a different way. When I say I've done martial arts before, I do full contact karate, so I'm used to getting people punching me full on and kicking me full on. I did a grading a while ago where I got my legs kicked so much that I could barely walk for a week after doing that. But that's a completely different feeling to running on your legs until they're in pain. So just being able to deal with these kind of different kinds of pain, it just gets you used to just dealing with things as they come along. So things might be annoying. It's like, that's annoying, but it's not as painful as getting my legs kicked in or running 70 kilometers or further, which I will be doing hopefully soon. But and also when it comes to running as well, running is very transferable in terms of the stress that you can deal with in life as well, in terms of just enduring things for a very long period of time. So when I ran that 70-kilometer ultra, I ran it in about 10 hours. And so within that 10 hours, 10 hours, mostly during the dark, I was able to just knuckle down and just keep going, minimum fuel, water when I had it. It's like, well, if I can deal with doing this for 10 hours, I can deal with doing something else that is monotonous or something that I don't want to do for a long period of time. It does really get you used to just grinding things out as you need to do them. I would like to do a longer race just so I could expand my my ability to grind things out like that.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating when we talk about running and we'll sort of talk on this and say, oh, yeah, well, we're a bit odd. We love running, and we do, and we love the feeling of finishing, and we love the excitement on the start line, and we love a chat halfway through. But there are these periods particularly when you get to the longer races, where it's certainly not all plain sailing, and there's bits where you're
Oh
just
yeah.
trudging around. And you're like, why am I doing this now? So I guess my sort of question at the end of this is how do you keep yourself going in those moments?
It's a good question, actually. I don't see failure really as an option. It's not like I get to the point, it's like, oh, that's enough now. There's never really something that's crossed my mind. It's just been, I want to get it done. I don't have many medals, you know. I just think, oh, I'm going to get to the end of this and I'm going to have a medal. The first marathon, I didn't get a medal because there were only 27 people. The first ultra was just like a test of the course, so I didn't get a medal. So I wasn't exactly motivated by the medals. But in future ones that I entered, it's like, I'm going to enter this large marathon and I'm going to get a medal at the end. That's going to be my little bit of motivation for that.
Yeah.
If I don't do it, then I'm not going to be satisfied with myself. I just kind of think that I will not be satisfied unless I finish it in some way. And the only way that I'm going to DNF a race is if I get really injured and I'm unable to carry on. One of the more crazy races that I don't think I told you about actually was last summer. At the end of summer, I did a trail run called the Owl Battle Trail Run. Owl Battle means like greens, blue pigeon. It's a kind of bird that they have in the area, and it was a sea to summit run from the coast in the Shonan area up to the peak of Oyama. But during the day before the race, a typhoon hit, and I thought, yeah, they're going to cancel this. They didn't cancel it at all. They just slightly changed the course at the top. It's like, yeah, if you go right to the top, you're going to die. So we're going to change the course a little bit.
Thanks.
So I went there, you know, with my raincoat on, running up the mountain. You know, I was, you know, really physically sick the day before. I thought I'm not even going to be able to enter this. I was running with a friend of mine that I did the 70K ultra with, and I thought I can't let my friend down, even though I couldn't keep any food down. I was so nervous about this race. But I went in with the attitude, I can't let my friend down. I can't let failure be an option. And it was actually one of the getting beaten down by rain and winds during a typhoon, running up a mountain that I didn't know anything about before, getting covered in leeches, watching these signs saying beware of bears and stuff. So I was like, oh, there are bears on this mountain. It was a fantastic experience and one that I would like to do again. Hopefully not with the typhoon next time, but it was, because it was so hard, it was one of the best things that I've ever done, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done anything quite that crazy, but we did. Michelle and I did a race a month or two ago. It's called the Dovedale Dash, and it's less than 5 miles, and it's the most ridiculous terrain ever. You have to run across a river at one point, and we started off on a slope that just went straight downhill, almost vertically, and we sort of I slid down half of it, covered absolutely caked in mud, and you're like, this is just stupid. Why am I doing this? And it was the most fun I've had on a run. So yeah, those kind of things, those challenges, they really get in your head, and they're so much more fun than non-runners would ever imagine, I suppose.
Yeah. Would you call that a race with character? Did they advertise it as something like
Yeah, I think so. That's what they come up with, isn't it? To try and entice people people into it. So you've obviously done other races since the ultra. You mentioned that one. Have you done other marathons? Is there other things on the way now?
Oh, I have indeed. So I entered the Shonan International Marathon, which is my first big marathon that had over 15,000 people in the marathon, I think. And that was a kind of local one, which is up and down the coast in the local area, which was fantastic. I then did some other, that's the one where I got my first marathon medal. I entered it for that. The next year, this is in the beginning of 2023, I ran another local race in that area. That was a 10-miler. I ran a local trail race running around a campsite. It was like 10 loops around a campsite, which had some pretty ridiculous terrain in it. It's like part of it, it's like, this isn't even a trail. This is just like a mud wall that you got to sort of scale up, climb up somehow. I entered another ultra marathon in the same area as the night ultra marathon, but this time it was during the day. So I got to appreciate the terrain this time. That was when I got my first ultra medal. And I am entering the Yokohama Marathon this week. And one of the only reasons why I was able to talk to you today is because I'm tapering for the marathon right now. I'm actually able to make some time in my training schedule.
Oh, that's great. Oh, well, good luck. Good luck with that for sure. Oh, and I wanted to mention as well that one other thing you're starting to do, because it's kind of how we connected, was obviously I bore people by talking about running and writing about it a bit, and you've just moved into the writing world with it, haven't you?
Yes, I have indeed. So I've got a Substack. My Substack is Bunburyodo. It's a Japanese word. Well, it's a Japanese idiom actually. It means the path of the scholar and the warrior. It's kind of my ethos that I have. Because I come from a science background, so that's the kind of scholar. I have a PhD in medicine. Not that I talk about it very much because I'm more of a kind of sporty person when I write. And the Bu is the warrior side. It's the martial arts, martial arts, running, exercise, and whatnot. Ryodo means both paths, so scholar, warrior, both paths.
Oh wow, oh, that's really interesting. So it follows a little bit of both, and it explores how to, I guess, some of the things we've been talking about today.
Yeah, definitely. So I talk a lot about running and martial arts and how they kind of cross over each other. It's all very multidisciplinary, I think, because you can learn a lot about martial arts from running and a lot about running from martial arts, especially when it comes to things like pain tolerance and endurance and whatnot. I'm a much better martial artist thanks to my running because I just don't get tired during sparring. And I'm a much better runner because of my martial arts because I can get my legs kicked in for 20 minutes and still be able to function and move around. So I can ignore those flavors of pain and still
Yeah.
continue to function.
And is part of it with both sports part of that crossover the discipline that you need to do them and to train for them and to be successful?
Oh, definitely. It's probably where my failure isn't an option mindset comes from. Because you really don't stop when you're tired, you stop when you're done, especially when there's people yelling at you that you're not allowed to stop. You kind of get that kind of attitude beaten into you when you do karate.
Yeah,
Very,
definitely.
very literally.
Well, that's one way to train and get your mind ready for those for 100+ kilometer race, I
Mhm.
suppose.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what's next? What's coming around the corner for you?
So after the Yokohama Marathon this weekend, I have the Shonan International Marathon in December as well, and then I got that other local 10-mile race, and then there's the Fuji Five Lakes Marathon in April next year. So I'll hopefully have some interesting articles about that, and I'm going to be ramping up my training as much as I can for that, trying to just get a lot of mileage in. I've been running 70 to 80 kilometer weeks for the past 8 weeks now. Sorry, 70 to 85 kilometer weeks for the past 8 weeks in preparation for this Yokohama marathon. So I'm probably gonna have to run further than that when I'm going to do the 118-kilometer one.
And just to finish off, for anybody else who's sitting at home listening to this, who maybe with a slight twinge in their back or whatever, and is thinking is running the sport to get me going, what would you say to them?
Definitely if you think I'm hurt and maybe running will help, always speak to a physician before you do anything like that. If you talk to a doctor and they say maybe running will help, listen to them. But it's also very important to listen to your body as well. Don't just think, oh, my doctor said that I should do this, so you just do it and then it hurts more. Or don't just but also don't just think, oh, it's my body, I know what's going on with it. It's probably a good idea to get it looked at. If you try to run off an injury like I did with my knee, you might be in for a bad time. I can grind out a lot of pain due to the training that I've had in the past, but I knew that I wasn't so injured because I didn't have any inflammation in my knee. It was just some localized pain. I did pay attention to all the signs and ice it when I needed to, do the rest ice compression elevation when I needed to, for all of those things. So listen to your body, but also seek medical advice if you are injured. Don't just try and power through it like some idiot that runs injuries off his knees.
Well, that's great advice to finish it. But you've also shown people that these things can be done. So that's fantastic too. And Anthony, thank you so much for joining me on the Running Tales podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to hearing the podcast again.
Thanks again to Anthony Swain for joining us on this week's edition of the podcast, all the way from Japan. I hope you enjoyed Anthony's story as much as I did. It was great to chat to him and to learn about how running has developed his outlook on life and on his karate and martial arts. If you did enjoy his story, please do leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to this podcast. It really does help other people to find it and to listen to wonderful stories like Anthony's. And I look forward to seeing you again next week.